Hi, I'm Mark Mattioli, and welcome to another reading of my novel, Boston Accent. We're going to pick up where we left off, and just another reminder, or a heads up from maybe someone who's tuning in for the first time. This book is of adult subject matter, and we're starting to get into it more and more. It's not for children. That's my disclaimer, loud and clear. This is an adult read, okay? And I have to get that out of the way from here on because I'm getting ready to hop on the roller coaster. Okay, front row. Hands up. Here we go. As I entered my sophomore year of high school, a new kid moved into the neighborhood by the name of Jake. Jake's parents had bought a large piece of land at the end of my street on the town line where Pineyville ends and Danforth begins. The property came with a historical house going back to the late 1600s. Jake's parents had money from a successful business his father had started, and Jake and his brothers and sisters were spoiled rotten. Jake was 2 grades behind me and 2 years younger, but you'd never know it from looking at him. At 13, he was taller than me and outweighed me by 20 pounds. He had these natural good looks, but in a rugged way. He was no pretty boy. When I met Jake, he was playing hockey in a local league as a goaltender. I started to go to his games along with his dad. His dad would drive us there in a brand new Lincoln Continental and would almost always smoke a pipe while he drove. I had never been in a luxury car like a Lincoln, and I was very impressed. I had also never seen anyone smoke a pipe while they drove. Jake's dad was a very serious, very intimidating man and only spoke when he had something to say. He did not make small talk, and he rarely spoke to me. The first thing you would notice when you were at one of Jake's games was how he towered over the other kids his age. Anyone who watches hockey knows that it has been common for years for a team to have an aggressive player on the team that is a better fighter than they are a goal scorer or defenseman. These players are known as goons. Now, Jake was no goon. He was a great goaltender, but if the opposing player made the mistake of skating through his goal crease or even positioning himself too close to the front of the net to set up a screen shot, Jake would knock them on their ass. This resulted more often than not of the gloves coming off. And until Jake, I had never seen a goaltender involved in the majority of fights during a game, nor have I seen it since. At 13, Jake was also having physical relationships with girls his age and doing things I couldn't even imagine, or things I could only imagine, depending how you looked at it. One Saturday, Jake stopped by my house and told me he was walking down to the corner to meet a girl from school, Sadie Flynn. Sadie lived on the other side of Pineyville and had her mother drop her off at the corner store, where she called Jake to start walking and meet her halfway. I had never met Sadie, but I had heard of her as she was a bit of a legend in our town, at least to our little circle of friends. As the story goes, on a dare for $20, Sadie had once performed fellatio on a horse. I never met anyone that witnessed this act of bestiality, but I was looking forward to seeing what such a person would look like. Jake and I found Sadie not a half mile from my house, and I was very surprised. Once again, like Jake, she didn't look 13 years old. She was tall, well-developed, and very much a young woman. She had a very pretty face that was tanned, big brown eyes, and very clean, well-kept, straight, long brown hair. The story has to be bullshit, I'm thinking. This girl couldn't possibly have committed such an act. Sadie tells us she has a pint of liquor in her pocketbook, and we move off the street onto one of the trails to drink it. After we quickly down the bottle, Jake tells Sadie how good her breasts look through her shirt, and that she should take off her shirt to give us a better look. Sadie pulls her shirt off, and Jake leans forward and places his mouth on her right breast. I'm standing there dumbfounded. These are the first breasts I have ever seen outside of a magazine. I reach out and touch her left breast and gently caress it, feeling the hardness of her nipple through my fingers. Jake pulls Sadie to the ground and starts to unbutton her jeans. Not today, Sadie says as she grabs his hand. I'm on my period. Sadie pulls Jake towards her and they begin to kiss. I'm feeling more uncomfortable than I already was and say, I have to go, as I head back to the street. Neither of them replies, and I don't look back. Maybe Mr. Ed did get his world rocked. Okay. As I entered my teens, I began to be called upon to perform different tasks for my neighbors for money. These tasks included everything from babysitting to feeding a neighbor's pet and watering their plants while they were on vacation. The neighbor that was calling on me the most, was also referring me to their friends, was the couple that had moved into Dee's house, Patrice and John. The first time I had been in their house was when my brother was born, and I had spent only a few days there. I did not know much about them, but started to learn a lot when they asked me to babysit when I was 15. I had some suspicions about Patrice, as she came across as a bit of a free spirit with a wild side. My mother considered her a friend, but she was much younger than my mother, and she sure didn't dress or act like any of my mother's friends. At the time I started to babysit, Patrice was 31. It was 1972. Woodstock was behind us by 3 years, and the summer of love was 5 years gone, but you would never know it from looking at Patrice. She dressed exactly like the hippie chicks you would see in the Woodstock footage, dancing around stoned, with long, flowing, colorful skirts and tiny little loose-fitting tops. Bottom line, I thought she was very cool, and I found myself mesmerized by her personality. Because of my suspicions, I was nosy, and I began to snoop around in their house when I was babysitting until I found what I was looking for: weed. Now that I had made this confirmation, I needed something to happen. I needed to be more than her babysitter and her neighbor. I needed to be her friend. Her husband John was very straight, and the total opposite personality-wise. He had what I considered to be an excellent record collection, and so one day, when I noticed John's car gone from the driveway, I knocked on the door and asked Patrice if I could listen to a particular album. She looked a little surprised, but invited me in nonetheless. The other thing she looked was stoned, and when I entered the house, it reeked of weed. I smiled at her and said, "Wow, it smells good in here. I like your style." Patrice looked a little concerned as she led me to the living room, where the stereo sat in the far corner with the albums in a rack beside it. She asked if I needed any help, and I told her I was all set. As I'm thumbing through the albums, I ask where the kids are, and she tells me they're with John and his parents. I pick out an album, place it on the turnstile, while Patrice watches my every move. I'm thinking she wants to make sure I know how to use it so I don't screw it up. If there's one thing I know, it's stereo components, and I get the music playing no problem. I turn it up a little loud, and she motions for me to turn it down a hair. I sit down on the couch, and she sits down next to me. I smile at her, and she's not smiling back. And she says, "Do you smoke pot?" I tell her I do, and she wants to know for how long. The truth is, I've been smoking for a little over a year, but not very often, as I tend to only smoke it when other people have it because I can't afford it. That's all I can do to buy cigarettes, which at the time are still only 50 cents a pack. I tell her I smoke it as often as possible. She leaves the room and returns with a little tray that has a small amount of weed on it and a rolling paper. "Can you roll?" she asks me, offering me the tray. "Sure," I reply as I take it. I don't remember ever getting credit for rolling a pretty joint, but they were functional. "You can't tell anyone about this," she says as I light it up. "Especially not your mother. Does she know you smoke?" She asks me, and she takes a long hit and holds it in. "Maybe, but it hasn't come up," I shrug as I take the joint back, and she passes it. We only take a couple of hits, and then she puts it out, which I find is her standard behavior. She doesn't like to get too high, as she has adult responsibilities, starting with 2 young children. I also learned that John, who enjoys an occasional glass of wine and nothing stronger, tends to give her a hard time if she appears obviously high in the middle of the afternoon. Next, I learned that Patrice loves to play card games when she's high, and she challenges me to a game of gin rummy. Patrice reaches for the cards, which are on a side table on the end of the couch, and gets up and sits on the floor across from me. We were separated by a coffee table. She begins to shuffle, and I ask her if she would like the couch, and I'll take the floor, and she says, I'm fine, I prefer to sit here. As we finish the first game, and it becomes my deal, Patrice begins to change her sitting position, and does some stretching out, indicating maybe she is uncomfortable on the floor. I ask her if she wants to switch seats now, and she says no. I just like to stretch. I stretch every day, at different times of the day, as needed. It comes from my training as a gymnast. I do yoga also. I'll teach you sometime. Patrice continues to stretch, and her stretches get more and more complicated and extensive as she goes. As she stretches and changes position, her skirt rides up higher and higher, and I begin to see flashes of her underwear, which she seems to have a little concern of. She finally gets into a position facing me, which I believe is called downward dog, and her loose-fitting shirt is hanging wide open, exposing her small but firm gymnast breasts. They are completely out of her shirt, and I am still shuffling the shit out of that deck of cards. When she finally finishes, she sits back and stares at what I think must surely be my bulge, only to say, "You haven't dealt yet?" I stammer, I was waiting for you to finish. When I look at the cards as I deal, I am expecting the ink to be going off them. But almost as bad, Patrice comments that the cards are sweaty. I glance up at Patrice, and she smiles and winks, and that was the start of my addiction to her. From the age of 15 until I was 22, I spend more time with Patrice than any other friend. The only difference, she is more of a seasonal friend. In nice weather, we sit outside in her yard on a blanket, or we go for a walk on the trails in the woods. On a hot summer day, we go to the beach. The settings might be different from time to time, but the outcome would always be the same. She would always have weed, and she would always flash me. In the beginning, I was very naive and thought maybe the exposing of her breasts and panties was incidental. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that Patrice confided to me that she had a form of sex addiction. She brought up the time when I had stayed with her when I was 11 and she was exposing herself to me. I had not made that connection at all. I don't understand her need to do this, but at the same time, I'm a 15-year-old boy with raging hormones. I'm still a virgin, and I have only seen 2 women's breasts and nothing below the waist. We almost have an unwritten contract between us, and both of us understand the terms. She shares her dope with me, she exposes herself, and I look. As our friendship grows, she becomes bolder and keeps her legs spread whenever she sits across me while wearing a dress. I no longer sneak peeks, but just stare openly up her skirt. Sometimes I see visible moisture on her panties where they are stretched tight across her crotch. I never speak of her actions, but I never look away. I begin to wear very tight running shorts with nothing underneath when we are together. As I become stimulated from admiring her, I sit so she can see the effect she has on me. Sometimes when she spots my hardness, she lays on her stomach across from me. That is my cue, and I sit so she can look up the leg of my shorts and admire her work. Most days looking up the leg of my shorts is not necessary, as I am sticking out of my shorts in full view. Our private perverted peep show went on and on for years without anyone knowing what was going on, but I could sense Patrice's husband, John, was less than thrilled by the time we spent together. I wasn't comfortable going in their house, which is most of the reason Patrice wouldn't see me during the winter. Sometimes she would make up excuses to come to my house and look for me, and there were many mornings I found her at my bedroom window. During all this play between us, I never touched her or her me. Although I found her physically attractive to some degree, I was not comfortable with the age difference. However, you can only look so long, and it was time for me to find the real deal with someone my own age. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this portion of our program, and I'll see you again in the near future. The novel is called Boston Accent. I'm Mark Mattioli. Ciao.